this point, we'll be going to that conversation on the future of Nigeria's macroeconomy when coronavirus ends, against the backdrop of current steps being taken by the federal government of Nigeria to provide a safety net. And here to help us look at all of that is Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Good to see you again. Quickly, before we begin to go into all the details, recently the federal government took the decision to ease the COVID-19 lockdown in Lagos, Ogun, and the Federal Capital Territory. And across the country, state governments have also relaxed the lockdown order. Do you think that, this was a necessary step that government actually needed to take, or do you think that it was premature? And what have we observed in terms of the implications of the lockdown for, business in Nigeria?
Well, thank you very much again for inviting me. I think the decision to ease the lockdown was a necessary one. It was the right thing to do, because in order to also preserve the health of the people, you also need to ensure that you preserve their livelihood. I know it's a very difficult choice to make, but the two components of life are important: the life of the people and the livelihood of the people. So we just need to maintain a balance. So that is why I will welcome the decision of the government to ease the lockdown. But we need to also realize that it's just a partial lifting of lockdown. We still have major problems with interstate connectivity, which is creating a major problem even for the economy itself, in spite of the fact that the lockdown has been eased. We still have some critical sectors that impact, especially on small businesses, that are still under lockdown. For instance, the entertainment industry. To the extent that we can no longer have gatherings of more than 20 people. All the businesses and the economies around issues of ceremonies, weddings, conferences, exhibitions, and all of that. Even the hospitality industry, the aviation sector. We have a whole lot of small and micro enterprises around this industry. If you're talking about the caterers, for instance, if you're talking about those who are in the rental business, if you're talking about those who are in the Ashwebi business, if you're talking about the tailors, if you're talking about those who are in the issue of decoration, the musicians, and all of that. So we have a whole lot of elements within the SME sector that are still under lockdown. And perhaps rightly so, because of the issue of the containment of this pandemic and the fact that we are seeing an increase in the number. But we need to realize that we still have a huge chunk of small businesses that are still under lockdown. So if you look around, you can see that the economy is still yet to actually regain momentum. And Lagos Street is still, is still very sparse. Not really much is happening yet. So, of course, it's a price that we need to pay, but we need to realize that, there has to be a good balance between the issue of preserving life and also preserving livelihood, because they are interdependent and they can be mutually reinforcing as well.
Mr. Yusuf, thank you, and rightfully so. We do have to find that balance between preserving life and preserving livelihood, which brings me to ask you, because what is looking likely is that a massive recession is going to come, and a lot of businesses are unfortunately going to have to default on their bank loans. Now, do you think that financial institutions are therefore under threat of becoming insolvent? And if so, what sort of financial institutions or banks are we looking at in particular here?
Well, part of the complaints that we have received at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce from businesses is the fact that the commercial banks are not given the kind of concession that they expect to get, particularly on the commercial bank credits that has been given to the businesses. The central bank has taken some very commendable steps in terms of giving moratorium on CBN facilities and given interest rate concession reduced from 9% to 5%. So we expect something similar to happen with the commercial banks. As at the end of 2019, the credit outstanding with the private sector with the commercial bank was about 15 trillion. And for many of those who have taken those credits, their businesses are in trouble as we speak. Banks and businesses will have some challenges at a time like this. Because one, an economy is contracting, the risk of loan defaults will increase. And again, this risk will vary from sector to sector. Take, for instance, the oil and gas sector. The sector is down at the moment. So banks with exposure to that sector are likely to face more challenges. Then we have some businesses that have high import exposure because of the macroeconomic implications of this COVID-19, implications for the foreign reserves, for instance, implications for exchange rates, implications for forex liquidity. Businesses that have this kind of exposure are also likely to have challenges. So to the extent that the banks are exposed to this, they will also have challenges to cope with. So there's a price to be paid by everybody in this situation. But what is important is the kind of response strategies or response policy measures that are coming either from the fiscal authorities or from the monetary authorities to ensure that some of these disruptions are mitigated.
Well, this week, the NMPC announced a reduction in the ex-depot price of PMS, that's petrol, from 123 or so to 108 naira per litre. Even if marketers have said, well, we won't see a reflection of this at the pumps soon enough because they still have to sell their old stock before they follow the new pricing regime. But at least this is the third time we have seen a reduction in the pump price of fuel in Nigeria during this COVID-19 season, following the reduction in the collapse of oil prices at the international market. Well, PPPRA says going forward, this will always be the situation, market-reflective pricing template. Now, is this the reform that we've been looking for in the downstream sector in Nigeria, or there are certain fundamentals that will still need to be addressed? What do you think?
Well, if there is any positive outcome from this COVID-19 experience, I think one of those positive outcomes is the reduction in the fuel price, reduction in energy prices. I think that is something that we should recognize as something that is positive. There are also some other silver linings or positive outcomes, like the opportunities, for instance, for import substitution. Now, with what is happening, import is going to become more expensive, either import of finished goods or import of raw materials. So this is a great opportunity for those who are ingenious enough, who are creative enough to provide substitution for imports. That's another positive outcome. And of course, positive developments around the issue of the use of ICT, digital platforms, and all of that. So these are positive developments. But coming back to the issue of the petroleum sector, of course, this is a reform that we have long waited for. And it's a very positive development. And I think that what is important is to ensure that all the regulatory framework that will make this possible will be activated. Because if you have a system that is deregulated, that will mean that the marketers will be free to import petroleum products, they'll be free to set up refineries and all of that. And that will lead to a lot of attraction of private capital into the downstream sector of the economy. But if we are talking about full deregulation, I don't see all this issue of PRA coming up with price tomorrow, price the following day, reduction and all of that. I think we should allow the market to be and allow even the marketers and all of that to be able to price their products according to what their cost is. That is what should be. And already even some marketers have complained that they have challenges even getting foreign exchange. So on their own, they cannot even import now because they have challenges getting foreign exchange from the Central Bank of Nigeria. So these are some of the things that we need to do. There are also regulatory issues. We have a law setting up the Petroleum Equalization Fund, which is also part of the rigid price regime that we had. We have a law setting up the subsidy fund. We have another law setting up the PPRA. Some of this legislation will have to be reviewed and possibly repealed so that we have a field where all those who are operating in the sector will feel confident that we have a fully deregulated downstream sector of the economy. But it's a welcome development. This is what we have waited for almost 15 years or 20 years. And it's something that will allow a lot of private investments to come into that space, to develop the petroleum downstream sector. We haven't had functioning private refineries for over 20 years because of the regulatory environment that we have had over these years. So this will create an opportunity for such investments, to come on stream and generate jobs and even improve government revenue.
Thank you for your analysis on that. Now, I'm taking a look at a PwC report that says that MSMEs contributes 48% to our national GDP here in Nigeria, accounts for 96% of businesses and over 80% of employment. Now, therefore, of course, as we've been discussing, the effects on MSMEs is dire and is going to be even more dire. But if we're looking at turning lemons into lemonade, do you see any new areas for employment that we can start to maximize the potential of that have risen due to COVID-19?
Well, there are areas, as I said, first, because imports are going to become more expensive as a result of the collapse of oil price. We are going to see an exchange rate depreciation, which may be drastic. We're already experiencing that. So there's a huge opportunity for import substitution. Because the more citizens find it difficult to import things, either because of the exchange rates or because of the issue of forex, foreign exchange liquidity, operators in the economy, consumers in the economy will be forced to look inwards. So looking inwards will create new opportunities for SMEs and even for larger enterprises. We are seeing a lot of IT solutions now. I mean, the use of digital platforms and all of that. That is also going to create some new opportunities. So these are some of the opportunities that the SMEs can be looking up to. But what is more important ultimately is for us to get over this crisis, get over this lockdown, so that the economy itself can rebound. Because the domestic economy is also a very big economy. All this problem of interstate lockdown, interstate access, lockdown of ceremonies and all of that, if by the grace of God we're able to flatten the curve and even get the curve to decelerate and the economy comes back alive, and you have the right kind of policy environment, you focus more on the ease of doing business, this economy also has the capacity to self-regenerate because it's a big economy. But we have all these bottlenecks now as a result of this COVID. So it is also important that we also support the efforts of government for whatever time it will take for us to get over this pandemic. The moment we get over it, the economy, by virtue of its size, also has the capacity to bounce back because it's a very big economy. This bad because we still have all these challenges with managing the COVID and all these restrictions with movement, with events and all of that. The moment that is off, the economy has a good chance to also come alive. And of course, there will be adjustments here and there, but there are prospects of a rebound of the economy because the country is blessed with a lot of entrepreneurs. We have very ingenious people, we have very enterprising population, and we have the capacity and the resilience to adjust to some of these things. So the opportunities are there, but these opportunities will only manifest after we're able to get over this pandemic and all the restrictions that have come with it.
Well, since the easing of the lockdown, which the federal government says will be gradual and phased, 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks, they would reconsider, what has been achieved and what needs to be done to make the situation better. One of the observations has been that, look, Nigerians have refused to take responsibility. So yesterday, you had, the Director General of the NCDC and the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, outlining again, for the umpteenth time, guidelines for businesses. But what we have seen is that, across the country, particularly here in Lagos, both the big businesses and the small businesses, they are not observing the rules, either in terms of social distancing or physical distancing or taking necessary precautions. What do you think is responsible for this? And is your chamber, involved in any activity to get, businesses to realize that this COVID-19 season requires new way of doing things?
Well, I will not fully agree with you that all businesses are not compliant. I know that, okay, let me say this, that most of the corporates, most of them, has high level of compliance within the corporate community, particularly in the formal sector. As we speak, as part of the partial lockdown, many of the offices are running with maybe around 20% or less of their staff. And each company, particularly the corporates, have put in place company-specific measures to ensure that there is compliance with the protocols and all of that. I take the point that there are a lot more challenges in the informal sector, particularly around the markets, around the public transportation system, and all of that. And I imagine that if you look at the use of masks, for instance, practically everywhere you go around Lagos, practically everybody is putting on the mask, even inside the public transportation system. And I've seen that even in the public transportation system, there has been a scaling up of enforcement. Because in this environment, it is one thing for you to put a legislation or regulation in place. If it is not complemented by proper enforcement, sometimes you have a lot of lapses. So the Lagos State government, from what I've seen, last month the police have scaled up the enforcement of this legislation. And again, the banks also did not help matters. The first few days after the partial lifting of the lockdown, many branches were not open. So that also created a lot of problem within the banking premises, long queues, people scrambling to get into the banks and all of that. So we also need to appeal to the banking community. At a time like this, their doors should be wide open so that as many branches as possible should be open, so that we don't have concentration of people who want to do banking business in just the few banks that are open. So the banks also should help the government to ensure that this situation is also addressed. But I agree with you, there's a lot that we need to do in terms of sensitization. There's a lot that needs to be done in terms of enforcement. All of this, I think, and within the Chamber of Commerce and the other other organs of the organized private sector, there's a lot of sensitization within our own constituencies. A lot of information that we have got from international organizations, from even local organizations, from the LCDC and all of that. All this information has been disseminated by practically all the major players in the organized private sector to ensure that within the corporate community, there is a high level of compliance.
Mr. Yusuf, thank you for your analysis on that. I guess it must also be noted that the Lagos state governments, as you said, have been ramping up on enforcement. I believe that yesterday 162 people were arrested for not wearing face masks. Now, I'd like to get your opinion on something. The Edo state government, we spoke about this earlier on the show today before you joined us. The Edo state government is collaborating with 4 telcos to see how they can provide mobile money or better financial inclusion to 125,000 people through a social register. Now, mobile money is something that has been a conversation for a while, and it's a concept that does promote financial inclusion at a greater level. Is this something that you would like to see being done at a national level, especially at a time like this?
I think it is something that is long overdue. I mean, for a country as big as this, we know what is happening in some of the East African countries in terms of the use of mobile money. Even in Ghana, yeah, in Kenya, in Uganda, and all of that. A lot is happening. And it is an area where we have huge opportunities for investments, for job creation, and also for promoting financial inclusion. So we need to accelerate the process, not just around COVID and all the consequences of COVID. It is also something that is very necessary to promote the advancement of the economy. Because financial inclusion is also a major component of progress in this economy. You can use it to get a lot of data and all of that. For instance, when we were dealing with issues of palliatives and all of that, and the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs was lining up people and handing over cash and all of that, that should not be happening in this day and age. You know, I mean, we have over 100 million people that have mobile phones. Even in the remotest villages, people are carrying mobile phones. Illiterates and all of that are carrying, even beggars have mobile phones in the country now. So we should leverage on this to be able to promote all this idea of financial inclusion and be able to reach the vulnerable people much more than all this issue of registered that the humanitarian affairs and all of them have been struggling to come up with. So I agree with you, it's the way to go. We need to accelerate the process, and we need to also make sure that the regulatory bottlenecks, because what we face in this environment most times, if there are good opportunities to advance the progress of the economy, sometimes we have a lot of regulatory problems. So we need to rein in on the regulators to ensure that we fast track this process, because that is the way to go to achieve our key objectives in the area of financial inclusion.
Quickly, Muda Yusuf, we have just about a minute to go. What would be your advice to businesses as they prepare for what analysts say is unavoidable recession, if not depression, in the Nigerian economy this year?
Well, it is important that there's a review of business strategy. I mean, business is about risk. Unfortunately, some very big risks are crystallizing at this moment. So all businesses have to go back to the drawing board, and a lot of businesses are already doing that, to review their business model in the light of what is happening, in the light of the fact that imports are going to become more expensive, in the light of the fact that it become more difficult to get foreign exchange, in the light that a lot of businesses will now have to be looking inwards, in the light that we need to reduce our cost of operation and all of that, in the light that we need to make our businesses smarter, you know, and less expensive to run. So these are some of the things that we need to review our business model to be able to remain afloat. Of course, some businesses may not be able to make it. Some new line of businesses will crop up. Some businesses may have challenges and here and there. But what is important is to have a proper understanding of the new environment, the new normal, and reconstruct our business model, our business strategy, so that we can continue to sustain our businesses.
On that note, we'll bring this to a close. Thank you for joining us this morning.